Hello and welcome to the Say Yes to Holiness podcast. This is Christina Simmons with just a quick reminder that if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure to get notified. Click that bell button so you get notified anytime that I post onto YouTube. And if you're listening to this on your favorite podcast platform, do the same so that you don't miss out on a single episode. So without further ado, let's jump into that food for the head, heart, hands, and feet. Our food for the head comes from St. Francis of Assisi. He says, "He who works with his hands and his head and his heart is an artist." I love St. Francis of Assisi. Lots of different reasons. One of the main ones is for the simple fact that St. Francis has done some phenomenal work within the heart of my spouse. My husband, Paul, is a secular Franciscan, and I have just been in utter awe at watching how it is that Francis's approach to following Christ has had such a profound impact on my husband. But one of the biggest things that I love is that Francis always had a perspective that was always a little bit different. But that being said, it's something where he always had so much courage. He had courage to walk away from a life of privilege, from a life which, especially in the 1200s, was extremely comfortable. And he chose a path of poverty and simplicity and also obedience. And that obedience was to the way. The Lord, his master, Jesus, told him that he needed to rebuild his church. And so he said about it literally, to begin with. Most of you probably know his story. And if you don't, go and Google St. Francis of Assisi. So I don't need to necessarily spend time there. But in this quote, why is this important for us to know with our head? Because we need to always be approaching our life of discipleship, our life, from a holistic perspective. And this means that we need to not be afraid to work with our hands. We need to not be afraid to engage our intellect. We need not to be afraid to engage emotionally with our heart, to feel something, to be invested, to be passionate. And when we do all of those things, then we are an artist. And that is what we are striving for, is we're striving to not just be a disciple, but we're trying to be fully who God created us to be. And each of us has been created uniquely and unrepeatably in order to be an artist, to be that particular work of art that no one else can be. So we want to be artists. We want to be working with our hands and our head and our heart. We want to be doing that. But so often our world will shy away from that. They'll be like, nope, it's just a job. Don't get invested in it. Don't put your heart into it. Or it's something different of, your heart's in it, but, it's all about your passion. It's not about what you're doing intellectually. Or it's all about the mind and maybe some passion, maybe some emotions involved, but you're not getting down dirty into the trenches. You're not working with your hands. So there's usually an aspect that is not integrated into our work, but we're trying to remember we're an integrated creation of God, and it's our entire person that thinks, that says, and acts. And it's only when we do this work with our Lord that he's created us for, that is when we're going to become exactly who he has designed us to be. It's when we do that. So we can't be afraid to go all in. We can't be afraid to go all in and to say, I choose this. I'm choosing to live this life of purpose. I'm choosing to live a life in which I am experiencing great peace. I want to choose a life and live it abundantly, even if from the world's perspective, it doesn't look that way. So St. Francis is someone who worked with his hands and his head and his heart himself. He was a beautiful person to encounter, maybe not physically or sanitary wise. His bathroom, not his bathroom habits, but his washing habits. The word is escaping me right now. Might not have been the best. So he might have smelled to high heaven, literally. But the fact is that he was fully alive. And that's exactly what we are striving for. This is why I'm sharing this quote with you from St. Francis, is because we need to be asking ourselves, am I fully engaged? Am I living a life of purpose? Am I living a life in where I'm experiencing deep and profound peace in the midst of the work that I'm doing and the actions that I'm taking and the life that I'm leading with God and with others and with myself? Am I open to receiving all of the gifts and blessings that God desires to give me? These are questions we have to ask ourselves. If we are, then we know that we are living a truly beautiful life. A beautiful life that is going to inspire and encourage others to do the same. Because that's what artists do, right? Artists inspire. But unfortunately, many of us aren't living lives like that. We're living lives that it's okay. I'm fine. It's good enough. And we're living in fear. And Jesus has never wanted that for us. Maybe you're afraid of being laughed at, or maybe judged, or maybe being excluded. Maybe you're not willing or able to trust God, that He's going to care for you, He's going to provide, or that you're even worthy of His blessings. Whatever it is, Jesus tells us constantly that we must fear no one, so that we can be the artists that we've been created to be, so that we can be painting, drawing, writing, speaking, sculpting, singing, playing, creating whatever it is that is unique to us. And as we do that, we can show and proclaim God's love from the rooftops through our very lives. So the question then becomes, are you? Our food for the heart comes from Venerable Monsignor Aloysius Swartz. He says, when you pray, you only have to ask for two things. You should ask for the light to see the will of God, and you have to ask for the courage to be able to do the will of God. Why might this be food for the heart? Well, one of the biggest things that we have to do is that we have to be willing in our prayer to ask God to do these things. God will give us all that we ask for. Maybe not in the time that we want it, but He will always respond to our prayer. But we have to ask. We have to have the courage to ask. We have to say, give me the light to be able to see your will, Lord, and give me the courage to be able to do it. But we have to be doing this in the midst of our prayer. We have to be doing this in our conversation with Him. We have to be saying, Lord, do this for me. Make it so. I'm a Star Trek, fan, and Picard, Captain Picard of the Next Generation. One of his taglines, besides engage, was make it so. And that resonated with me. So at times I'll be like, Lord, make it so. Make it this way in my life. I'm asking that you do this for me. And when we do this, then we're able to grow in faith and trust. Then we're able to act courageously in the midst of great challenges. But the biggest thing is that we're putting ourselves in a place of humility. We're putting ourselves at our Lord's feet. And we're saying humbly, help us grow in our capacity to be obedient. Help us to be able to grow in our courage, to be able to exercise obedience. Help us to be able to see and hear in accordance with His will. When we do this, then He is going to make it so in our lives. But we have to spend the time. That's why we spend time. God needs time in order to give us those eyes to see, those ears to hear, and for Him to grant us the wisdom to be able to act upon what we see and hear in accordance with His will. Again, we have to ask and we have to spend the time. Our food for the hands comes from a different Francis. This is from St. Francis de Sales. He says, always be impartial and just in your deeds. Put yourself into your neighbor's place and him in yours, and then you will judge fairly. Frequently, therefore, examine your heart, whether it is so disposed toward your neighbor as you would have his disposed towards you, were you to change places. This is the true test. How many of us have heard the phrase to walk in someone else's shoes? How many times do we think that we're able to do that? Well, St. Francis really breaks it down here for what that entails. And it means that we put ourselves in our neighbor's place and we examine our heart to see whether or not we're open to such a thing, whether or not we're open to being disposed towards our neighbor. What does it mean to be disposed to our neighbor? It means to be open, not just to be kind, but to be open with generosity. So we are being generous in our estimation of who they are and what they desire. We're giving them at a bare minimum what it is that we would desire, what it is that we would like. So we're starting, that's a minimum. That's like a low bar. We always have to presume better for anyone else. And that is how we will then be able to judge fairly. So if we begin with, well, this is what I would like, then you up the ante and you add to that. And when we do that, when we think the best of the other person and we are going to trust that they're going to do the same for you, that is when we're able to have that perspective that's necessary so that we can truly judge fairly. And as St. Francis de Sales, this is the true test of where if we were to switch places, we would not be upset by that. This is what we're striving for. This is what we should be trying to do in our lives. We should be trying to live lives in such a way that if we were to switch places with our neighbor and experience how it is that we treat them, then we're not going to be upset by that. So we always have to try and make amends if we do something reckless or imprudent. We have to always be trying to will the good of the other by loving them. This is what love is. And we have to do what is best for the other, for them, not for ourselves. And when we do this, then we're able to practice impartiality. We're able to be just in our ways with other people, especially in how we think and speak and act. And each time we do this, then we increase our capacity to be able to act courageously. And when we act courageously without fear, then we are always going to be strong, courageous, beautiful, good, true witnesses of all that is good, true, and beautiful in the world. This is what we're striving to do. This is what it is to be a disciple. This is what it is to be a follower of the way. Of course, this is always easier said than done. When we find ourselves in those situations, then what we tend to do is that instead of, because we're afraid that we might be too reckless, then what we start to do is we're not looking out for ourselves, but sometimes we'll hesitate because we're afraid to trust in the goodness of God and the goodness of God as it might be expressed in our neighbor, in someone else. But again, that's not the way, is it? That's not what the truth himself tells us we need to do. And if we don't, then we're not going to live the life that he desires for us. We have to strive to be impartial and just in our own deeds, regardless of the situation, regardless of how reckless it might be, regardless of how it might be that you're going, I'm not looking out for myself. I'm like putting all my cards on the table and I got nothing coming back my way. But we trust, we have faith, and we do what is right. We do what is right. And when we act such a way, when we speak in such a way, and we're thinking in such a way, then regardless of what results, we will experience it because God will care for us. And God knows all things. So have no fear to live the way and to express the truth so that you can have that life to the full. Our food for the feet comes from Venerable Mary of Agreda in her book Mystical City of God. She writes, voluntary poverty restores to man the nobility of his condition, liberating him from vile servitude and reinstating him his noble freedom and mastery of all things. The soul is never more a mistress than when she despises them, and only then has she the more firm possession and makes the more excellent use of riches when she gives them away or leaves them of her own free will. Only then her appetite for them is best satiated, when she does not care to possess them. Then, above all, is the heart set free and made capable of the treasures of the divinity, for which it is furnished by the Creator with almost infinite capacity. Venerable Mary she writes here about that great paradox. She writes about the reality of voluntary detachment, of not being attached or possessed by our own possessions, so that we're able to act in and with freedom, and we're able to, in the end, obtain a mastery over all things, because no things are the masters of us. As we do this, this ennobles us. It makes us better. It gives us the capacity for us to make better use of all the blessings that we are given, and we're able to let go of things of our own free will, so that, again, we're not held hostage by them. We're not captives of them because we don't desire to possess them. Also, real practical here, if you don't have a lot of stuff, then you get a lot more free time because you're not having to take care of all the stuff. Case in point, a car. I'm not saying don't go and have a car. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that if you don't have something like a car, then you don't need to worry about getting the oil changed and keeping it clean. And, there's a whole bunch of things that come with having a possession. A house is another case in point. Nothing wrong with possessions. But every once in a while I go through an exercise where I think, if everything was to burn down tonight, would I be okay tomorrow? And my thought always is, yeah, I'd miss this book or that thing or, but not in such a way that I would want to, that I would judge those things more important than, is my family safe and am I okay? My physical health, is more important than the stuff. So, as Venerable Mary of Agreda points out, when we have more time and freedom, then our heart is set free, and we're made capable of receiving the infinite treasures of the divinity. And then we're the richest of all human beings, aren't we? And that's why we should choose, as much as we can, voluntary poverty, because it ennobles us. It makes us better, because we are not going to be slaves to our things, particularly like our phones, okay? but rather we become masters of them. This is what it is to be abandoned to God's will. Detachment is a part of it, and voluntarily practicing poverty, not so that you aren't taking care of your responsibilities, okay, but rather that you are setting aside things so that you are able to make more excellent use of them. That's why I said it's the great paradox. We're setting aside these things so we can make better use of them. What? But think about it. When we have set them aside, then we're able to give them away freely. We're not possessed by them. And we ourselves are made better because of it. And our Lord richly blesses us because of it.